Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the NDIS Circle. I'm Dan McCutcheon, and today I'm excited to be joined by Jonathon Power, the owner of Empowered Community Services and Astalty, which I think is now the most used business operations software for support coordinators in the country, which is super exciting. Empowered Community Services is based in Lake Macquarie and the Newcastle areas of New South Wales and provides core and capacity building supports to NDIS participants, helping them live more independently and achieve their goals. And Jonathon, as I mentioned, is also the driving force behind Astalty with his co-founder, James, which streamlines processes and enhances support for support coordinators across Australia. Jonathon brings a unique perspective shaped by his lived experience, growing up with family members living with disabilities, and his personal journey has greatly influenced his work, fueling his passion for making a real difference in the disability community. I'm stoked to have him on the podcast to discuss his story and the evolution of Empowered and Astalty and his thoughts on the future of the NDIS. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Jonathon. Thanks for jumping on the podcast.
No worries, mate. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you for having me on.
So I thought maybe just to kick things off, if it's okay with you, could you share a little bit about your personal story and how you came to work in the disability sector? I think when we caught up on the phone last week, I was saying, most people I speak to that are working in the disability sector have some sort of connection to supporting people with disability, and that's why they sort of gravitated that way, and that's the case with yourself as well, isn't it?
Yes and no. So, I do have a strong connection to the disability community because I mentioned both my parents have a disability, but I kind of fell into the industry as a support worker pretty randomly. So
Right.
I was at university and I was studying psychology, and I was looking for a job that kind of fit around my schedule at the time. And a couple of friends that I went to university with all had worked at the same place. Now this was a place in Newcastle, and they did a few things. So they kind of did out of home care for residential for youths. And then they also did disability care. And so I got put in the residential side for kind of the first 6 months. And then I got a phone call and they were like, hey, we're moving you to, they used to call it Life Maps, which was the other area of the business. And it was kind of just one day I was working in one area, the next I was in another. And I had no real understanding of what it entailed. I just understood that it was working with people with disability. And this would have been right when the NDIS was kind of rolling out. So they moved me to what they call was Life Maps, and I started working in SIL whilst I finished my degree. And that was kind of my introduction to the disability sector, just supporting people in a SIL environment.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's actually sort of similar to my story as well. I was also studying psychology and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and my sister was a support worker and she became a proper psychologist, and I sort of took over supporting the young man with Down syndrome that she was supporting, and then I just loved doing that, and the rest is history. So thanks for sharing that. And so what's your journey with starting business and being a business owner? Did you start Empowered as your first organisation and then Astalty more recently?
Yeah, so Empowered came a little bit down the track. So I was a support worker for a few years, really enjoyed what I did, finished my degree, never became a proper psychologist, unfortunately. And I loved what I did. I love the guys that I supported. I was supporting those guys in that SEAL environment for maybe 3 or 4 years. So didn't want to be a psychologist anymore. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Enjoyed what I did at the time. So kind of just kept working there for a few years. Empowered didn't come about until 2017, and it kind of came as a result of working in that SIL environment. So the guys that I supported, they didn't have a community access provider. And these guys were quite complex. And that's the reason why they didn't have a provider, because someone would come on board, they would support them for a couple of, occasions, and they never built any rapport or any, resilience to some of the outbursts or behaviors and things like that. So they would come in, they would support them, they would take them out once, have an incident, and then basically just say, hey, I'm not coming back. And that kind of repeated multiple times with pretty much all the guys there. And one of the big things that I used to do was to take them out into the community. That was my favorite thing. I'd come on support, and we were kind of limited in the amount of time that we were allowed out in the community. So I'd come in at 9 a.m. I'd be like, all right, Brendan was his name. I would take Brendan out first, then I would do Adam, then I would do Steve. And it was kind of that's how I spent the morning, just taking the guys out into the community. I kind of felt because we were limited in terms of the staff and we didn't have any access to any other providers. I felt like they needed more time out in the community. And like we started hearing about the NDIS, and I'd started like, maybe we should start a day program. I didn't really understand how it all worked. Probably joked about it for like 6 months, and then started looking into it like really, really seriously, and then started going down the path of like registration and getting all my policies and
It's a
procedures.
process.
And like, I just didn't know, and it wasn't like what it is now in terms of like online. You go somewhere and it's just like, go here, go here. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do. But trying to sift through everything at that point in time, back in like 2016, something like that, it was just like another world. So trying to figure out what exactly I needed to do was a pretty big journey.
Yeah. Did you have any mentors or anyone that owned businesses or worked in the sector that you could lean on throughout that process?
No, that's probably one of my biggest regrets, is not having a mentor, because it's so important in business, just trying to bounce ideas off people or learn from other people's mistakes, or just having that guidance. Like when you're just figuring it out on your own, it takes forever.
Yeah, and I think that's like an amazing thing about living in 2024, that you don't necessarily need to seek out a one-on-one mentor to go and get coffee with every week. There's so many podcasts and material out there, isn't there, for work and career and business and in the disability sector that you can listen to, books you can read. There's so many learnings out there now with the internet that you don't necessarily, you can sort of get your mentors from a variety of different places from the comfort of your home through your headphones, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be someone, like you said, that you go and have coffee with. It can be, but it could just be someone that you're listening to on a regular basis or learning from, to take those lessons and then go and implement them in whatever way you see possible.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And how many participants is Empowered currently supporting at the moment? What does the team sort of look like?
Good question. I think we have around about 150 participants kind of in our community access, and then probably about 40 in some of our group activities. And then I think we have around about 230 something participants in our support coordination part of the business as well.
Yeah, awesome. How do you structure up the? Cause I don't think many providers are doing that group-based support. I feel like that's an area that's not everyone wants to be in a group, but some people do. So yeah, how do you sort of go about designing those groups and working within the NDIS framework? Because for me, it sort of seems like it can be sustainability can be a bit of a challenge with that group-based pricing. Yeah, what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, the pricing's made it difficult. They've definitely added some complexity for providers, and if you haven't got like good software to handle it, it becomes even harder. Now, Astalty, I'll be fully transparent, we don't have the capability to handle groups just yet. So unfortunately, it is a bit of a process for us. And that's because they've split the whole thing out in regards to the 1 to, whatever the ratio is. Well, the ratios are gone now. You're basically divvying up the community access line item by however many people attend. Then you're adding back your non-face-to-face, then you're adding back your center capital costs, and then you're trying to do that on a scale. If you've got 40 participants, every single person that attends a group for 4 hours, they've got all those different charges for just that one support. But then you might also have travel to and from. You might have travel during the group, and it just becomes this huge. You can imagine what an invoice looks like, right?
Sounds like an administrative nightmare.
Yeah. So, when they first announced it, they said, we're doing this to reduce the administrative burden. I can't see how that is going to reduce the burden, because, like I said, one support might be, 6 lines on an invoice, and they might have 5 days of group activities. We don't have anyone like that, thankfully, but I imagine that invoice would be 5 pages long. It would be huge.
Yeah, I think so. That group-based pricing might need a fresh look, because I haven't seen, there used to be more groups, I think, in the block funding days for people, and understand that not everyone wants to be part of a group, and individualized funding and support has done so many amazing things for so many people. But I think there needs to be definitely a place for group activities as well, for people that want to foster friendships and connections with people of the same age in their community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, not to jump ahead, but if we're talking about the future of the NDIS, it sounds like people are going to be pushed more towards group programs, but they also need to be viable for providers to offer that service in the future as well. So yeah, I think it needs a hard look and potentially a bit of a makeover.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. While we're talking about sort of those challenges, I'm just thinking challenges around framework and pricing. Do you guys do any work in regional areas and remote areas throughout New South Wales?
No, so everything's Newcastle, Lake Macquarie based. We
Okay.
have any remote or very remote supports.
Yeah, yeah, that's a challenge as well, isn't it?
What about you guys? Just curious.
Yeah, we had supported a family in Broome up the top of WA, because I think because of the thin market of coordinators and providers in some of those areas, like particularly in the Pilbara and the Kimberley and at the top of WA, can be really thin up there. Like I remember when I was at the NDIA as a planner and doing these quite high cost plans for people living out in like Derby and yeah, in regional remote areas. And then I checked the plan 3 months in and not a single dollar had been spent. And I was going like, what is going on? And then sort of checked in and it just sort of like emphasize that message to me that like the funding is only part of the picture. I think that gets talked about a lot, understandably, but it's also the implementation and finding the right supports. So the funding is only the first piece of the puzzle. Finding the right supports and finding the right providers is the second, but equally as important part of the picture, I think.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't imagine there'd be too many providers in those areas.
No, yeah, I think I don't know what the answer is. Whether the NDIA need to take some more of a market stewardship role. Like I remember pre-NDIS, the Disability Services Commission here in WA, they would fly therapists in, and there was some block funding for those areas for certain organisations to go visit, or for organisations that were based there, rather than just the individualised funding. Additional loading on the price per hour for organisations. I'm just not sure that's been super effective in all areas. And you mentioned before, if you feel comfortable talking about both your parents live with disability, how's that sort of shaped the way that you've approached your businesses and disability support? They face particular barriers that sort of lit a bit of a fire in you to want to address?
Yeah, so I think it definitely helps me in terms of, I guess, empathizing with people's situations, just kind of seeing things firsthand in terms of the support that people need, going through the planning process, because I've never done support coordination, so I've never sat through like an actual plan review process or anything like that. Whilst we do provide support coordination, I've never done any sort of hands-on stuff. So I guess like being able to see it from that side of things as well and empathize, I guess, the process, what it's like, some of the questions that are, being asked, and just having an understanding of how black and white things can be sometimes during that process. Being able to say that you sometimes are able to do certain tasks and things like that, like it's very black and white, and depending on how you kind of answer those questions is very much how you end up with, specific packages and things like that. So I've seen kind of all that kind of play out. So I can definitely empathize with people when they don't get funding, or they don't really understand the process, or they get annoyed because they have to answer the same questions over and over. I've seen like, my mum and dad both kind of go through that process, just not being able to really understand how to implement their plans and stuff like that. Seeing that firsthand as well. But then seeing like the great things that have occurred, how happy support makes them, or like being able to go to family events and things like that. Recently, my son turned 2 years old and I was able to have mum and dad both there. My mum's profoundly deaf, so she didn't want me to do this, but I organized an interpreter for her to come and be able to communicate to everyone that was at the event. And that was like just previous experience where often mum is kind of isolated because of her communication barriers from being deaf. So I was like, you know what? Sorry, mum, I'm just going to go outside behind your back, organize this, have an interpreter to there. And like spoke to mum after, and she loved having that person there because she was able to speak to so many other people that normally she wouldn't be able to. Or just having me or my brother just translate half-ass. I'm not very good at I can sign to mum, but like I'm not the best interpreter, that's for sure. So it was great to have mum there, and then my dad was able to meet my son for the first time. He was able to come along with his support worker and kind of meet my son and all my friends and family as well. So
That's
that was a really
awesome.
positive experience.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Having that interpreter there, well, obviously you don't want to necessarily be interpreting and trying to be there for your mum takes you away from perhaps experiencing fully and being present with your son on his birthday and talking with everyone else. So having someone there that's specifically there to support your mum with interpreting, I think that would have freed things up, obviously. So that's awesome. Yeah. And we've spoken a little bit about Empowered. What about Astalty? What's that? And yeah, tell us a bit more about Astalty.
Yeah, so it's a business operations software. So it's basically a place where you can store, information about all your participants. It will handle all your invoicing. It will track funding. We've got a whole heap of, reports to kind of assist you in running your business and your day-to-day operations. So if you're an NDIS business and you need software, there's many out there. We focus at the moment kind of on support coordination, a little bit of allied health, and we're going to start getting into, more of the core support, so scheduling, still one-on-one group stuff, like I mentioned, hopefully make that a bit easier as well.
Yeah. And what sets Astalty apart from some of the other business operations systems out there?
I think just having first-hand knowledge of what the problem is and how it should be solved. And I guess everything that we do, we really think about the problem deeply and what's the best way to solve it, and trying to think about how it kind of how it interacts with everything else in the system, and trying to make sense of all of that and then present it in a way that's easy for business operators just to jump in there and get a feel for it. So there's a lot of software out there where you sign in, you start your free trial, and it's a minefield. You don't know how to get started or get going or anything like that. So we've really tried to make it easier for providers to get started, do our training, easily book a demonstration. If you need anything, we've got a user guide there. You can get support really quickly as well. I think our response time at the moment is 55 minutes on average.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know that that's a super valuable feature. Obviously, if you're struggling to navigate a new system, having someone there that you can ask questions to, that's great. Yeah. And what are some of the key features and benefits? I think I saw you can drag and drop emails across in Astalty. Is that right? From Gmail, and some sort of case management unique features and things?
You could, until Outlook upgraded their app.
Oh, okay.
So if you've got the
Damn.
old version of Outlook, you can just drag and drop and chuck it in the case note. But the new version, for some reason, doesn't like that. Don't know why. So you have to copy and paste it, put it in your case note, and kind of do it that way, which is a little bit more manual.
Yeah, oh, that's annoying. They removed that, because I was chatting to my team about that. Often, yeah, you obviously doing billable activities. A lot of it is via email, and being able to sort of drag and drop as proof of what you've worked on would be a super valuable feature. But there you go, is what it is.
Hopefully in the future we integrate. We've got integrations with Microsoft and Google in terms of the calendar. Email will be one of those things on the roadmap.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. And it's yourself and James, isn't it, co-founders? What are your sort of different roles? He's more on the development side of things, is that right?
Yeah, James handles all the development. So he's built Astalty basically from scratch on his own for the first kind of 2 years, which is pretty cool. And then recently we've been growing and developing the team. So now we have a team of 4 developers, James included. Then we have our customer success team. And then I kind of handle all the sales and marketing and that side of things. So sales, marketing, and I guess any sort of NDIS related information. Like if we're trying to build a feature, James and I will, dive into that, and I'll explain the problem in NDIS terms, and he'll try and solve it with the technology.
Yeah. Awesome. And I've seen as well, you're sort of trying to harness that power of community as well. You've created a community for business owners. I saw, why have you done that, and what do you see in the power of community?
Yeah, so I think in this day and age, I think it's, super important to have a community around your brand. So you're not just talking, at people, you're kind of engaging with them on a more deeper and personal level. And I think that we're all going through the same things, because I'm an NDIS business owner as well. So trying to talk about the industry at the moment, trying to provide a safe space for people where they can come together. Because what I noticed is there's so many Facebook groups out there, but there's a lot of negativity, or there's people who are afraid to even ask a question because they know that someone in the comments is going to have a go at them. And in our community, it's quite interesting. Some of the first posts were people getting quite, vulnerable about things that they were unsure about, or things in their business that were happening, which I hadn't seen at that level in Facebook groups for those reasons that I mentioned, unless they were posting anonymously. So the intent was kind of twofold. One, to create like a safe space for everyone to just talk about NDIS businesses in general. And then two, we're kind of creating an ecosystem around Astalty as well, so having a place where we can grow and develop our community.
Yeah, I think that's important what you said. Like those Facebook groups can be a great source of education and information, but at other times it can become sort of an echo chamber of anxiety and noise, I think, as well. I just think it's human nature, isn't it? When, especially in working in this space, which is often quite uncertain, and you're working with a system that's a little bit bulky and doesn't work super well or super efficient at all times. So I understand how it happens, but that's awesome that you're trying to create a space where people can be vulnerable, and there's no stupid questions, and it's got a really positive sort of vibe to it. So yeah, thank you for doing that. While we're talking about the NDIS and the landscape and the changes and the uncertainty, how do you sort of manage that as a business owner? Obviously, Empowered, you've got a larger team there that's actually delivering direct supports there with Astalty. It's support coordination primarily at this stage software, and there's the whole transition to navigators. We're not really sure what that looks like. Yeah, where's your head sort of at with all that? And I guess as the leader of those businesses, do the staff that work for you, do you see that anxiety and uncertainty in them, and how do you support them through that? What are some of the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, good question. So I guess there's so many proposed changes, and we're starting to kind of see them come into effect. And I guess from up until the start of the month, it wasn't really clear around what exactly was going to be happening. They're trying to prepare the workforce based on, assumptions or, bits and pieces is difficult because you can't really put your finger on what exactly is going to change and how it's going to impact people. I guess all you can really do is talk about the change is coming. We're not sure about what exactly is going to be changing, but we know that the change is coming, and just kind of preemptively having those conversations with the team and then saying, look, as soon as we know how this is going to impact the business, we'll be sure to make sure that everyone's informed and things like that. So that was mostly around like the legislation. We kind of were having those types of conversations. In regards to support coordination, that's another thing that's kind of like everyone in the team is aware that something is going to happen, but they don't know when. So they already have a bit of an idea and understanding, and I think they have since this all started to come about. So it's really just, assuring them that as soon as we know what's happening, or if we're planning on changing our strategy or anything like that, that we'll be informing them. But and I think that's what all you can do as a business owner is just communicate openly and transparently around what you know and what you don't know. Where people get stuck is where they just communicate nothing, and then everyone's just left in limbo, like, what's going on? And then next minute the business implements a change, and it's just like, what the hell? And I think that's the thing that really scares people the most.
Yeah, it's comes back to communication is key, isn't it? And yeah, it's similar. Obviously, I run a support coordination business, so whatever that transition to navigation looks like is going to significantly affect us. And yeah, I'm sort of trying to take the same approach of just communicating things as they come up, while also not listening to all the noise, and reassuring everyone in the team. And I guess, yeah, just being a little bit flexible and agile and looking ahead to the future as to, what are some other opportunities that can come out of this. Because most changes that come up, there will be some sort of opportunity or some way that we can pivot. So that's sort of where my head's at as well. AI is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but obviously it's sort of taking the world by storm. It's not really something that's super new, isn't it? It's just that works a lot better now. We use AI a little bit in our business for report writing and just sort of streamlining things a little bit, but I'm keen to explore how it can support us to be more efficient a bit more. You mentioned on the phone last week that you use it a little bit in your business. Explain to us how it benefits the businesses that you run.
Yeah, so I think like there's so many different ways in which I use it, from getting like ideas for like content creation in terms of marketing, to writing captions, for example, for social media, to writing like email blasts, or like even if you can't think of the perfect word to fit in that sentence, just being like, what should I put in here? there's so many different use cases, and I like more often than not, I'll have ChatGPT open, 90% of the day, and using it for all sorts of reasons and stuff like that. So in terms of like probably one of the biggest use cases, and we kind of alluded to this the other day, in terms of like developing systems and processes in the business, was using a mixture of a couple of different AI tools. So one, using Otter AI, which is like a transcription tool. So if I was like talking to it, it would just be transcribing every single word, basically. So using that tool, and then using ChatGPT on top of that to pretty much just put out every single system and process that we had in the business, because we had a time probably about 12 to 18 months ago where we had systems and processes in place, but they were very much in my head, or we had like 3 versions of a process and people didn't know which one, and they weren't kind of like documented in terms of version control, and it was just messy. So we would like onboard a new staff member and we would miss things because it wasn't documented correctly. And someone recommended me this book, and it's called Work the System by Sam Carpenter. And it kind of just made me completely rethink how I systemized the business, how I wrote SOPs, and definitely recommend it for anyone who's looking to structure their business. But we kind of read that with the department heads at Empowered. And then from that, we're like, okay, we need a complete overhaul. So we kind of just started with like all the systems and processes that were like super urgent. We had to have them in place immediately. And then kind of used Otter to talk the processes out, because I knew most of them, they were just all stuck in my head. And then copy those transcripts to ChatGPT, put this in an SOP, use the following formula. So, all of our SOPs look the same. And then putting that into a Google Doc, for example, and then starting to build out our entire system library for the whole of Empowered. So it was a pretty big journey, and we have maybe like 300 processes documented now.
Yeah, wow. I think that's awesome, and definitely can take some notes if you haven't used Otter AI. But I think it's probably a key area that business owners can explore as sort of the profit margins have gotten a little bit tighter with operational costs increasing, wages increasing, but a lot of the like prices for support coordination, prices for therapy, things remaining quite stagnant. How can we do things a little bit more efficiently using AI and using processes, as well as, when organizations grow, trying to keep that quality and consistency. If you've got a documented process that, a new employee's trained on when they're onboarded, and the existing employees are they're required to revisit that regularly, and everyone's got the same consistent process, that's going to lead to more consistent service delivery, isn't it? So, yeah, I think there's so many benefits to it. With the future of the NDIS, future of your businesses, where do you see things heading in the future? Where do you see the scheme heading in the future? As long as I like to finish on this crystal, whatever you call it, stargazing question, and just get your thoughts.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of change on the horizon. I think where it will be in the future is anyone's guess. If I had to predict what it will look like, I think that it will still exist in some, extent. Of course, I don't think it's going anywhere. I just think that the way in which people are funded is going to be under much more scrutiny. And from what I can tell, I think there's going to be more of a push towards things like group ratios in terms of day programs and things like that. Potentially more push towards 1-3 SIL and things like that, less 1-2. And I think more justification for a lot of things. You're starting to see that with STA at the moment. And I think, if you are someone living in SIL, for example, as well, I think in 1-to-1, you're going to really have to have your documentation, reports, and things like that to really justify some of that funding. So I think it's just going to be a little bit more scrutiny. I think I saw something today on Facebook actually, and it was asking a self-managed participant. It was a screenshot to upload an invoice for a purchase over $2,000.
Yes, I saw that same post.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it's kind of like across the board, regardless of, it's not like they're just targeting one thing. It's, a lot of areas. So I think that's what the future is going to look like.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing a little bit about you, Jonathon, and your businesses. And yeah, I've definitely been observing from afar, particularly Astalty, and how much that's grown. So yeah, congratulations to you. You're doing awesome work, and yeah, just really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate you having me on here.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Cheers.